Guys, welcome to another episode of Metal Mastermind. Your host and co-founder, Jason Stallworth, also host and co-founder,
Ken Cadellis.
And we have a special, awesome, and I'm so excited to announce the guest on today's podcast. It is Alfred Potter the Great. I made you sound all royal and stuff there, dude.
Hey, glad to be here. Cheers.
Dude, thank you so much for coming on. And guys, we're just going to talk about a lot about shred guitar. Alfred has just a ton of tips, a ton of value to give you guys today. And even if you happen to not play guitar, listen to this podcast, because the concepts that Alfred's going to talk about and the questions that we have for Alfred, well, those are going to help you with whatever instrument you're playing, your voice, whatever you're doing. Hey, they'll even help you in life. So, Alfred, today is all about really how to, really master the art of playing guitar in your own style, of course. And dude, you are known as a shredder. I think you and I both are known as shred guitar players. I will say you're faster than me. I know that for a fact. But dude, let's just start out. What do you think is like the most important thing to getting into playing faster? Let's say, I think a lot of folks are listening, they're all at different levels, but let's say you're kind of middle of the road, not necessarily starting out, but you're playing lead guitar, but you can't seem to get past that next, to that next step. What's the important thing to focus on?
Well, if we're talking about speed picking in particular, then you need to make sure, first of all, that you have a picking motion which is as simple as can be and which just goes back and forth rapidly. Also, speed bursts are really good. I talk about this a lot with my students. Just very, very short exercises where it's maybe as little as 2 to maybe 5 notes long, and you just play something that you're working on as fast as you can, and that just kind of introduces your brain and your hands to the higher speeds that are out there, and you push them toward those higher speeds, really shock them and put them out of their comfort zone.
That's awesome.
That's awesome. So just kind of like you're saying, and I get this. I've kind of taught myself this as well, the 3 notes at a time. I've done some videos on that. But what you're saying, though, is instead of looking at this super long solo or playing this, minute-long shred pattern, you're saying break it up into micro chunks and have these short and small successes, because that's going to give you the confidence to go to that next level, right?
Absolutely right. And if you're working with small chunks, you're not overwhelming the brain as well. Because if you're playing far too much, like you've got way too many notes ahead of you, your brain is actually busy looking forward ahead to those notes that are coming up, and you get overwhelmed. So with smaller chunks, you can really focus on the task at hand. And then later on, you can stitch those chunks up together, and it's less of a workload on the brain.
It almost, you're like kind of storing every single thing in like muscle memory because of just this rapid like focus. That's very cool. I almost imagine just like, some drummer like me who's just like, all right, time to work on our blast beats. And then you like push it too much and it's like, oh, that's great. I love that concept. It is very challenging to kind of stretch the boundaries of speed, but it's like, I guess trying to play as fast as you can, but like in short bursts to let your muscles just kind of react and then try to form that connection is it's actually a very intuitive way to do it.
I think it's like working out too, man. Like you go to the gym and you can't expect to get jacked in 2 weeks of being in the gym, right? I mean, you're going to have to do this consistently, over and over, and just a little bit at a time over a span of time. And hey, you can achieve those results you want. But Alfred, we're talking about practicing here. I know you've got some more notes to share in regards to practice. Like, what is the best way to practice?
Well, quite simply, you must always practice what you're bad at. Now, unfortunately, this will take you down somewhat of a masochistic, monkish road, where you're always punishing yourself and you're always feeling like you're not good enough. But if you can get past that negativity of that and look forward to the rewards that you'll reap later on, It really works well. So yeah, always practice what you're bad at. I always say that if you can do something, stop doing it, because you're just spinning your wheels otherwise. So the moment you can shred this particular lick, move on to the next, the one that you can't quite do.
That's interesting, man, because and I know we have like our natural, I feel like anyway, we have things that we're naturally good at and maybe naturally not so good at. Alfred, I struggle with this. I struggle with your concept. I really do, because there's part of me that I want to. Now, you're inspiring me right now, this moment, to spend more time on some of the things that I'm not naturally as good at, because certain things like speed picking, alternate picking, dude, that comes so natural to me. I can do that all day, every day. But where you're amazing at all these techniques, but you're really amazing at sweep arpeggios. Well, that's a weaker side. And I do practice them, but I don't spend as much time. I've kind of told myself, well, let me just focus on what I'm naturally better at. And yeah, I'll still practice over here, but it's just not going to be a huge component of my playing.
Yeah. I get that.
That's kind of like our comfort zone, right? So it's trying to push around outside of your comfort zone. When I was learning about drums, my father, he was a Latin percussionist too. And, I'm like, here, I'm trying to learn like Dream Theater and stuff. And he's just like, yeah, let's not do that just yet. Like, that's very easy for you, because you know all about Dream Theater. Try actually playing some samba.
Completely different, right? Completely different style.
Yeah. Expanding your horizons, and that created a palette for myself to be able to play and influence my music in all these different types of genres. Alfred, you were going to say something. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh, I can't remember what it was. What was it? Talk about comfort zones.
Yeah.
Oh, right. That was it. Okay. So, right. Yeah. About practicing what you're bad at. Now, when you confront what you're bad at, your brain will automatically recoil, because the brain hates feeling like it sucks at something. It hates admitting to itself that it sucks at something. So, anyone out there listening now, have you ever gone to play a solo from one of your favorite artists, and you'll play through it and you'll find that you can play some of it, but there's a bit in the middle that you can't quite do? Now, what usually happens is an avoidant behavior kicks in, where people will just play the solo up until that point and then stop or start again. They won't actually attack that bit that they can't do head on. And that's what I'm saying when I say practice what you're bad at. Isolate that bit of the solo that you can't do and just practice that. It's not going to feel good, but it's going to lead you to glory.
You are changing the way I'm thinking about guitar playing, Alfred. And I've been playing since 1989, man. You're changing my approach here, and it's a good thing. So thank you for that. That's a gold nugget, guys, to everybody listening right now. You're right. Our brain, and I've been applying what you're saying, your concept that you're talking about right now. I've been applying that to every other area in life, right? Getting out of the comfort zone, realizing that I think the brain lives in what we call survival mode, and that's our comfort zone. And when we step outside of that, we're no longer in that survival. It's like, no, stay here. This is how we survive. Be comfortable. When we stretch ourselves outside of that, though, our brain has a natural tendency to pull us back. It's like, no, that's dangerous. Don't go out there, right? So this is how we thrive, I think, in many things and almost everything in life. Ken, all of your, by the way, guys, if you don't know Alfred Potter real quick, he does have a prominent YouTube channel. You've been out there for a while. He also has a course called Sweep Picking Master. He is part of Metal Mastermind here. We'll talk more about that at the end of the podcast. So do listen to the entire podcast like you're supposed to. But no, I just want to thank you. That's changed the way, changing the way I'm thinking and approaching guitar. So I really need to kind of go back and look at the things that I need to focus on more. Now, outside of focusing and practicing on things that you suck at, to get better at, what are some other things that you implement or recommend others implement in their practice time?
Well, you are what you practice, is what I say. First of all, before you do anything at all, you've got to figure out what kind of player you want to be, and then you need to practice according to that. So For instance, a lot of my students, when I get new students, one of the most common requests they have, one of the most common goals that they give me is that they want to become better improvisers. They want to be able to come up with solos on the fly. And so I'll always say to them, what are you practicing right now? And they'll tell me something like, oh, I'm practicing chromatics. I'm doing this solo by Iron Maiden. I'm doing 5-string sweeps. And I'll say to them, that's great and all. That is great. You'll get good at those things because you're practicing them. But at no point in there did you ever say that you were practicing actually jamming over tracks, which is directly your goal. So, yeah, I think you should be always mindful of what it is that you want to get good at and directly pursue that. You are what you practice.
Wow, that is profound. You're tackling right there the core of the problem. It's like, oh man, if I'm wanting to be this master improviser, I need, to have all the licks in the world at my disposal. And that's the thinking that they got, right? It's like, oh, I need all these different tools and skill sets in order to create my improvisation solo to be a masterpiece. And then you're like, you actually need to improvise. You need to practice improvisation. That's the thing that you need to practice. So it's actually almost like a duh moment, but it's almost like we kind of like fool ourselves because we think in order to do that you need like this skill and this skill and this skill, but it's actually you're trying to build an intuitive feeling on how you actually approach. Like you should be doing all of those things and then also doing this too.
That's powerful, dude, man. That is, like we said earlier, we're talking before the podcast. It's kind of like you are what you eat. You are what you practice. And, a lot of people will say, well, I want to be a metal guitar player, but then they're going to a guitar instructor and their guitar instructor is teaching them blues licks. It's like, hey, I don't want to learn blues. I want to learn metal, man. I want to play Metallica, Amon Amarth, or whatever, right? So it does make sense. Whereas I encourage people to be well-rounded, but only to the extent that you desire. If you don't desire to play blues or country or whatever, then why would you practice that? You know what I mean? So why not just go straight into what Alfred's saying here? You are what you practice. That's so powerful, dude.
Well, yeah. If I may add a little bit to that, I think there is actually some value in practicing stuff that you're not, normally going to play. I think
country?
Yeah, totally. I think in many of these instances, you learn different skills that you can apply to your music. I mean, I wouldn't have otherwise applied Gaelic music if I didn't actually try to play a bodhran. So I learned a new skill. I learned a new rhythm where I learned flamenco and I implemented it with metal. So these are sort of things that they don't seem obvious as a way as to why should I explore that if it's not necessarily tied to what I do? Well, you may derive some inspiration just even from some of the basic, more fundamental things, rhythm, melody, or things of that nature. Those are my 2 cents.
No, I totally get that. And that's why I say, expand outside as long as that's what you desire. Because I don't like to see people learning to play a style they just really don't like and they're not connecting with. I am a big fan of branching out. I mean, you guys both know. I play acoustic shows on the side. I've got one tonight, in fact. So and of course I do some metal covers. Sometimes I'll sneak those in, but it's mostly 80s rock and pop. Completely different from what I do, for a living, during the daytime with metal and rock and all that. So, but I enjoy that though. Then knowing that style has expanded my playing, but I also enjoy doing that. But no, there's some truth to all of it. Expand outside your comfort zone, right? Even outside of your style. But make sure you enjoy what you're playing as well, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah. So Alfred, you're mentioning practicing what it's sort of like you gotta do what you put where your money where your mouth is, so to speak, right? You're going to want to be an amazing sweep picking guitarist. You're going to have to really go through the grind and then really learn more about picking. What about if somebody is they want to get better at something, but maybe they're having trouble finding the time to do it, right? And I always say in that instance, it's like, well, you have to make the time, right? But in many instances, let's say somebody's been playing for a long time and they say, oh, well, I'm kind of good at this skill, and they don't really nurture that. What do you think would happen after a period amount of time and they're like focusing on other things and then they want to try and pick that up again?
I'm not sure I understand the question. So, sorry, were you talking about the length of practice sessions?
Yeah. So, I mean, in the sense of you've mentioned something, for example, like if you're good at something, practice what you're bad at, right? So, okay, that's great. So now what if this person neglects to reinforce skills that they already are technically good at?
Okay.
Do you think this is something that they should address as well, or should we always seek to find new things that we're bad at? That's my question.
Oh, I see. Yeah. Well, that's a really good question, because if you stop practicing something, if you neglect it to go and focus on something else, you'll actually get worse at that skill that you're now neglecting. This happens to me all the time. I don't spend any time jamming anymore. It's all just alternate picking practice, because that is something that I'm nowhere near as good at as I'd like to be. I haven't jammed, it must be months now. And whenever I try and get back into jamming, it's just scalar nonsense. The feel is gone, So yeah, if you neglect a particular technique, it's use it or lose it, and you'll lose it.
So, man, that's really interesting, dude. Sorry, Ken, go ahead, man, because I know you got a question related to this.
Yeah, no, and I think you're kind of getting to somewhere where I'm trying to get as well. Yeah. Because my thought about that is, it seems to me like the brain is the brain is an amazing thing. Like, and it can recall memories, from your childhood and all this kind of stuff. So it has a big storage of data in it. But it seems like that storage of data always kind of cycles to what is relevant in the now to what is something to put away in the back burner, right? And my thought process is like, okay, well, how much data can we put in the forefront that we are always constantly able to use versus the skills that we know how to do, but they're put on the back burner? You get where I'm saying with this?
Oh, okay.
Like that's just something that I'm now philosophically curious about, and I'm just wondering, perhaps Jason or Alfred, feel free to chime in. I don't know, but like, what do you think our limit is on something like that?
So essentially, you're talking like a lick library, like things that you have immediate, quick access to that you can just blast out at any moment.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. Because I'll learn like a complicated classical etude or something, and as I'm learning it and playing through it, I'm thinking to myself, if I don't play through this like at least once a week, it's going to disappear, and I'm going to have to relearn it again like next year. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. That's really interesting, man. And we're talking about like having the skill of improvising. All I do is improvise. That's all I do. At my live solo gigs, I use a looper pedal to loop an acoustic rhythm, and then I'll play acoustic leads over that. Sometimes I'll pick up the electric and play some distorted leads over that, which is a really cool part of the show. But dude, I rarely ever play the exact same thing. I'm constantly improvising. I don't sit down to learn anything. And I think that's kind of a skill maybe that I've sort of lost. Yeah, I play cover songs, but I'm usually transposing them, and I'm playing them on acoustic, so they're just chords, right? It's not like I'm playing the actual every intricate detail, right? Because I can only replicate so much with one acoustic guitar. But maybe that's a skill that I've lost, learning other songs. I just don't spend a lot of time on that because I'm constantly improvising or I'm writing my own stuff. But no, that's very interesting. One question I have, Alfred, how do you feel? There seems to be this war on shred, right, these days, and I get it. Like if you scroll through social media, and I try not to scroll too much these days. Everybody and their uncle, they're just sitting in front of the camera, just shredding. And once you found the fastest shredder on the internet, well, hey, guess what? I'll scroll through and find an 11-year-old on the other side of the world that can do it better, right? So you've got this shred, and there's a lot of talk about, well, shred with no feeling and that sort of thing. I just want to get your thoughts on that, man. Have people given you a hard time? Because you're an accomplished shredder guitarist, but you've got the melodies, you've got the feel as well. But what are your thoughts on that initially?
Oh, well, first of all, I don't recommend to anyone that you compare yourself with people on social media, because you're going to see the best of the best. I'm fully aware that there are like 7-year-old Japanese girls who could kick my butt.
Yes.
And yeah, I don't need that sort of like, that crushed the morale. So yeah, don't compare yourself to people online. Yeah. The war on shred, I like how you put that. I'll often put up a video of myself doing a playthrough of my song or like a shred lick or something. And you'll always get that comment from that one guy who says,
one person, right? Yeah.
Yeah, but can you play with feeling? Right. It always happens, right? And then if I try and play something slowly, sometimes there's a guy who says, yeah, but can you shred? And it's like,
you can't win.
There's no way to win this. Yeah, so now I'm trying to just make solos which have a bit of everything in it, a bit of shred, a bit of feeling. Yeah.
Yeah. I noticed in your playing, you're kind of into, are you using whammy bars and stuff in your playing?
Oh yeah, I'm endorsed by Kayla Whammy Bridges.
Yeah,
I absolutely love those things. Yeah.
I'll just say this because Alfred, you played on my record, and man, there's like this dive bomb at the end of your solo that is just like freaking amazing. I love that. So can you touch a little bit on like, because your entire course on sweep picking is all about in a sense like economic picking and like working your fretboard and your fingers and lubricating them to be able to do these things in a sense. But like the whammy bar, can you talk a little bit more about that, and why do you use a whammy bar?
I've never really looked into the squeal tricks or anything like that. I pretty much learned one when I was a teenager, where you just kind of like do a whole series of like a brush of natural harmonics near the 3rd fret, and then you just kind of hope that you get it, and then you just attack with the whammy bar. That's like the only trick I know. For me personally, whammy bar usage is reserved for like artistic note contouring, because with bends you can bend up and you can release, and that's pretty much it. But with the whammy bar, you can pre-dip it and raise up to the note you want. And when you start using a whammy bar to really contour your notes and dip and weave like that, you're able to create leads that have almost like a vocal quality to them. And you've got to remember that the human voice is the oldest musical instrument that we have in our species. So if you can create melodic lead guitar lines that are vocal, people are going to connect with that really well.
Subconsciously, yeah, that's a good point, because everybody always says like the vocal's the most important thing, right? Because that's how we connect with the music and we hear the lyrics and all that stuff. So you're essentially saying, yes, treat the lead guitar as almost a vocal and make it, in a sense, it's singable. And you have all those vocal tendencies to, almost relate to that. That's a very good point. I don't think I've ever heard somebody talk about the lead guitar, playing a part as a lead vocal. That's
I consciously do this, and I consciously leave in gaps in between phrases to simulate where a singer would take an inhale for the next line. So that's just a neat little trick that I do as well to make it more vocal.
Amazing.
So, that is amazing. So I want to just repeat. I want everybody to hear what you just said. So you're saying you give the solo these little bits in between phrasing to breathe a little bit. And in other words, it doesn't have to be a constant flow of notes that never end. You can let it breathe, because I'll tell you one thing about certain singers, Bon Jovi, for example, and I know we're getting into the hair metal, but I love Bon Jovi. I always have. I listen to Cannibal Corpse one day, Bon Jovi the next, right? But I love his vocals. I love all his 80s stuff. But in a lot of his songs, he is kind of annoying when you listen to some of them, especially when you're trying to sing it. It's like, okay, we need a breath here, man. It's too wordy. So I think the same goes for solos. It's like giving it a chance to breathe. I think can allow the solo to be more impactful. Vocals as well, for those of you who sing. And I love what you said about, replicating or replacing rather the vocal with your lead guitar. In the sense, I believe that the guitar, you can have the shred stuff in there, of course, right? But it needs to be memorable. If it's just you throwing up a bunch of notes on somebody just for the sake of, hey, look at me, I can play fast, versus having the fast stuff in there, but having it have this beautiful flow to it. I think there's an art to doing that, which Alfred, you do phenomenal at that, dude. You're guys, Alfred has albums out there. You can look up Alfred Potter. You've got your stuff out there on iTunes, Spotify, all those places as well, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, and your latest album is Splendor of Sands, right? Is that correct?
That's right. That's the one. Yeah.
And how can you describe a little bit about that process when you were making Splendor of Sands? You mentioned, this idea of creating vocal phrases in a sense with lead guitar, and what are some experiences that maybe that you remember of as you were tracking that? Can you describe maybe some of the challenges of thinking in compositional ways? Because I know you're also a very, very intricate composer with your music. It's lots of inspiration from all your sweeping, and it's definitely entered your compositional phrase.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I've got to give a disclaimer. You should not take any of this advice, because I don't know what the hell I'm doing. I'm the most inefficient composer and recorder you'll ever find. I'm self-taught, and I think it really shows.
Oh, man.
Because what I do is when I'm making a track, I just try everything, every riff that I can think of, every lick, every run, every melody. I try it all for even for just one track. I record like an album's worth of material. Dude. And then what's worse is I just chop it up and then just stitch it together like some horrific Frankenstein's monster. And I just do this, and I mash it and I move it around. And after about 3 or 4 months, I have a track that, well, resembles a track, but it's barely a conscious process.
That's very, very interesting. But actually, I heard this from another one of our instructors, Nick Z, when he was writing and programming drum parts and how to create like a song, and he was trying to basically create some sort of rhythm that he enjoyed. He would do this in blocks of bars, and he would say, okay, I like this, let's expand that. And then he would play guitar to that, and he would loop it for a bit. And then what he would do afterwards is, okay, now that we have this one loop, let me go back to the drums and change just the drums, but use the same guitar loop and see how I can go back and forth and influence one part with against the other. And I thought that was a very interesting process of trying to create like a new, song, or, you're trying to fill out, avoid writer's block. But this kind of feels very similar to that in a sense, where you have hey, this is my color red, this is my color blue, my yellow, green, right? And you have all these different licks and riffs and stuff like that. And then you're just like, okay, let's see how, green and blue come out together. Oh, that's teal. Do I want that in my song? No, maybe not. Maybe I want something that's more purple. Let me add red instead. I think that's a brilliant way of going about songwriting. It's a methodical approach that allows you to feed off of ideas that you've created and then see where that goes. Because I can imagine, like, you're building your riffs, you got your rhythm section, you add some bass, and then all of that together, now you can start fooling around with lead melodies and how does that influence the rest of the riff that comes next. And it's a nice approach.
I like it. Yeah. I mean, I'd say, dude, if that's the process that works for you, then that's what works for you. When it comes to certain things, especially songwriting, I don't think there's a right or wrong way. There's only the way that works for you the best. And, I say this to people about, food and their diets all the time. The best diet is the one that you can stick with, the one that works for you. You know what I mean? So I think it's the same when it comes to music. A lot of times you've got this process. And you can look back at your work and see all the time and effort you put into it, and just be proud of it, and just be proud of the way that you came to that. That's really cool, man.
Cool. But
Dude.
let me ask you guys,
Yeah.
because you record as well, obviously. Ken, you've got your big album coming out soon.
Yeah.
And Jason, I've listened to your music. I bought some of your albums as well.
Oh, thank you, brother. Thank you.
How long does it take you guys to make a track from beginning to release?
For me, 8 years.
No, not an album, a track.
Just kidding. No. Good question. Actually, Jason, why don't you take this one first? I think I got to think about it a little bit.
Mine is very simple, dude. I just and it sort of shifts over time. I've done all instrumental work, my first 3 albums, and then the 4th album, Masterpiece, back in 2019. That was my first album with vocals. And what I did with that is really all the albums I had taken just riffs that I had written and recorded over the years, and just took those and re-recorded them and just added some parts to it. In my playing is nowhere near as intricate as yours. I'm definitely more of I love that I don't want to say pop sound, but just kind of 80s metal style. But really, I don't even want to say radio friendly. That's probably not the right word either. But I guess my rhythms and such, yeah, there are riffs in there. Maybe more of a Slayer. I'm more of a Slayer meets old Metallica meets Joe Satriani type of composer, I guess you could say, if that makes sense. Whereas, Alfred, you've got a lot of the neoclassical influence, and I think that's much more intricate and takes a lot more thought when you're writing music, right? Because you've got to make that, you've got to put that all together. Mine's pretty simple. And these days I'm writing more vocal songs. The album I'm working on now has got vocals to it as well. And I'm just taking a completely different approach. So the hard part for me is the music and the lyrics have to come together in a way that I can sing and play at the same time, because I want to perform these live at some point, especially this upcoming album. I've got some other musicians that I hope to kick off some live shows with this album. So they'll have to learn the parts, of course. But yeah, that's the biggest thing for me, is because like with Masterpiece, I'll tell you this real quick, and then we'll get to Ken's. I recorded the tracks, the music, then I wrote lyrics to that music and recorded the vocals. Then after the fact, after its release, I'm like, okay, well, let's play this live. And I had a hard time with 2 or 3 parts of a few songs, singing and playing at the same time. I'm like, okay, I probably should have made sure I could have sang and played at the same time. And I'm doing that now as I'm writing through this. But the process, I just try not to overthink it. I get hung up on things. I'm hung up on a bridge of a song right now, but I'll just lay it down and come back to it the next day.
Yeah, that's certainly not my process. My process feels a little bit like workshopping with a whole bunch of like scrap ideas. I don't know. I never get to a point where, because my music is so organized to a point where I have to really like go into it on an arrangement level and try to intricately like create like counter melodies and inflection with texture and harmonics. And it's a very, very, like I'm a very orchestral backed type of composer. So, and most of my orchestral experience doesn't really come from like, classical composing. It comes more from like video games. So, because I was like a big fan of Zelda when I was a kid. So I learned a lot of orchestral techniques through learning from transcribing Zelda music. So my tendencies are kind of very similar. Actually, when I write with string sections first. And I feel string sections allow me to emulate like guitars in a sense, because they are also very attack based, but they can do long notes. And I just kind of jam around on strings for a bit. And then, when I'm working with like a client, I mean, I might go from start to finish within like, 3 months or something like that, with a fully mastered release. But when it's my own stuff, it takes me quite a bit of time because, well, one, life, and then I have to also try and figure out like, how do I want layers in my music to sort of play a certain part? I usually stick to strings, brass, percussion, definitely, as a representation for drums. And, I think when it came to this album, there's a point where I actually had to reorchestrate the entire album. That took me about a year to do. That was very, very difficult to do. But it was worth it to, in my opinion. It was far beyond what I had before. But yeah, I guess it depends really on how long, it takes to create a piece, because it depends on the piece that you're creating. If you're creating this monstrous concept, then yeah, it'll take a lot longer than making just, one tune that stands on its own. But I guess the question would be like, well, what do you want to be the end result from this song? What do you want its intended effect to be? Because that's going to guide you really, really heavily on how you go and approach that. And I'll tell you this, Alfred, because this was the advice that I was given when I was speaking with Michael Romeo. And I said, I wanted my drums to sound organic. And then he says, do you want it to sound organic, or do you want it to sound epic? Because they sound organic, but they're not epic. And I was really after epic, but I think my own like insecurities of, they should hear how I play always, naturally. And then it's like, okay, yes, they hear that, but it's not going to be to the scale of this epic proportions that you're trying to make, which is living in a fantasy world, really. And I was like, you know what, that makes a good point. So,
that's a very good point.
Something to think about.
Yeah.
So, that's very cool. It's a much deeper question than I expected to answer.
That was great. I do have another question regarding you two and the recording of your music. Just because and this is regarding perfection when you're recording your tracks. Because I remember with my first album, Argonaut, that I made back in like 2013, 2017, I would obsess over getting the solos absolutely perfect. And it would take me all day. And by the end of it, when I'd finished recording the solo, I didn't feel good. I just felt like solemn because I felt dishonest. I wouldn't be able to pick up my guitar and play that. That's what I was thinking to myself, I can play all that stuff now, but back then it just felt like a poor and dishonest representation of myself and my playing. But now with my second album, Splendor of Sands, all those solos are like first, second, third takes. And I feel so good about them. Do you know what I mean? Like, have you guys ever obsessed over nailing a particular part of your song to the point where it makes you feel dishonest? And have you moved beyond that kind of thing yet? Or what do you think?
I mean, for me, my answer is short again on this, because I always tell people I'm like Leonard Skinner. I'm a simple man. Simplicity is the name of my game. That doesn't work for everyone, though. Right? Like in Ken's case, you're talking about full on orchestration, man. So there's so many parts, and if one of those parts sounds off a little bit, well, the whole thing is kind of, it's just not going to work. With me, there are two rhythm guitars. I hard pan each one. The second rhythm is sometimes harmonizing with the other, or maybe playing a full chord while the other's playing a power chord. So I don't really obsess over those things too much. As far as the rhythms go, the rhythms, I want them to sound awesome, and they need to be in sync, obviously. But if it's just a hair off in some parts, if it's off enough to where people are like, okay, there's clearly a timing issue here, I'm going to re-record it, right? But if they're off just a little, I believe that those two rhythm tracks, they're not going to be exactly the same. And I think that's the beautiful thing about metal. You kind of hear that as a little nuance, and it just gives it this, more powerful impact, as opposed to everything just being perfectly synced. Now, this is my opinion. When I listen to music, I like to hear some of those little nuances between the two instruments. Solos, different story. I'm really going to hate myself if the solo sounds sloppy and I decide to release that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's going to be a topic of conversation. Even some of the best guitar players out there, I won't name any names, but some of the solos, they're epic, but they're also sloppy in certain parts. And I could we could all probably think of 10 or 20 bands, guitar players that have that. And there's an element to that I like, because there's a rawness and a liveliness to that. But at the same time, I think at the end of the day, it has to be something that you can go back and listen to and say, you know what, that's me. It represents who I am as a musician. And I think there's room to grow, as always. Your next album you're going to write after that is maybe not necessarily better, right? Because it depends on who's listening, but it will be different. You have grown as a musician, and growing, I don't want to go off track here, but growing as a musician may not necessarily mean getting faster, right? Like me growing as a lead guitar player from now into 2 years from now, it might not even be being faster per se. It might just be the way I approach my instrument a little more, right? I might be more expansive, in other words. So you might hear some just different things as I grew in that time, if that makes sense. But I try to keep things simple, man. And if I can't pull it off on stage, I won't say I won't record it. But real quick, a story with Kirk Hammett. I think there's a solo part on the Master of Puppets album. I don't know if I think it's on the Master of Puppets song in the studio. His finger, he's got this in a book, his finger slipped off the fretboard and it created this high-pitched weird sound. And they're like, okay, you got to leave that in there. That's really cool. And he's never been able to replicate that on stage. Real quick, I saw something on Ben Eller's channel. He's a pretty popular YouTuber, going over an Eddie Van Halen. Sounds like a real simple riff, but there's a weird picking pattern to it that's hard to nail. And he's like, I've watched Eddie play this on stage and videos and all, but he plays it like 3 or 4 different ways every time. So I say all that to say this. I like to give myself room to be expansive and just kind of, because you got to remember, you got to have fun with what you're doing too. I mean, you don't want to be sloppy, right? There's right. A difference between being sloppy, but also, you know what? I played it this way, but I'm on stage now. What would it sound like if I tried it this way over here? And maybe it's a little different, right? So that's just kind of my approach. Ken, what about you, man?
Well, I kind of do a lot of pre-production, a lot of pre-production before I go and book a studio time with my engineer. And I don't like to engineer my own sessions when I'm playing. I really don't. I like to be put into the musician hat first, So it's like I'll hire somebody who I trust. And then I say, okay, let's go make it happen. And when I do, I've already been playing that song for like many months. And when we made the Circle of Dead Children, the New Homeric album, we went in and we were focused on basically getting really good drum tracks. We had everybody else there to sort of sing along and play along, but it was more so focused on make sure we got good drum tracks. So everybody already had the band vibe feel at the studio. And we played the longest song on the album, which was 33 minutes. We played that 3 times. And that was it. It was just like, we're going to play this to the best of our ability, but the natural inconsistencies or mistakes that might happen are okay to leave in, because this is a monstrous piece and there's a human element to doing it that way. And we go in post and we do a little bit of editing, but we don't go crazy to the point where it's like at the studio we're trying to finalize like little intricate patterns and trying to get the perfect take for each section, because we're just like, like the vibe of playing through it continuously is more important than trying to get every single part perfect. And you can hear that in the playing. It's like there's an anticipation to certain things because we're in the moment and we're playing it, sequentially. I think there's something to say about that. I feel it's almost as if like you're listening to a live show, because you're not focused on perfection. You're focused on creating a moment in time that was captured. And that's I think something that we lose with modern recording, which is this, constant overdubbing all the time. We don't actually play it all together as one. And then starts with the rhythm section, right? Recording drums and bass and whatnot right there in the room. So yeah, I would say I rehearse a lot before then, so that when I'm in there, it feels more like an instinctual moment and not me trying to figure out my part to get the best take.
That's important, man. Yeah, because you don't want to write the song as you're recording the song, right? When
Definitely not.
When you're paying someone to engineer, it's like, hey, I'm going to write this differently now, and just cost you 3 more hours.
Yep. Nope.
That's interesting.
I mean, sometimes there's some good parts that come out of improvisation. That was actually the moment when we went into the studio. At that moment, I had invited Elizabeth to come through, and she sang on the album a little bit, and I was like, now I actually need you to sing the rest of my album.
She's got such a beautiful and just beautiful and killer voice at the same time. Just a really, I love her work.
Yeah,
Alfred, what is next for you, man? What's your next step? Like, what are you doing? I know you've got this new album out. We've got Sweet Picking Master, and we want to get that in your hands, listeners. We're going to talk about that briefly here. But what's your next step?
Finish up this second album. I've got one track left to go, so that's going to be 3 or 4 months of utter stress and insomnia and self-doubt and writer's block, no doubt, as well. Yeah, and I haven't really thought much beyond that, but I imagine I'll just take it easy for a bit after releasing that track and just make some videos for YouTube. I've always liked the idea of making like an hour-long instructional video, like the ones they made back in the 80s and 90s, like Ingo Malmsteen and Vinnie Moore. I'd really like to make one of those and make it like kind of cheesy and give it like an 80s filter. I've always liked the idea of that. I've always wanted to release a video like that.
Released by Hudson Music and
REF. Yeah.
I would love to see something like that on your YouTube channel if that's what you're talking about, Alfred. I'd love. I know you put out a lot of short videos. I'd love to see some longer instructional videos because, dude, you have such a cool personality. You're like the dude that I could just sit down and just talk to over coffee or beer or whatever, and we would just chill out, man. Play some tunes, chat, and we'd all hang out. You're just one of those dudes, just really easy to get along with, easy to talk to, but you would never know that you're such an amazing guitar player because you don't have any type of ego whatsoever. And I remember watching your YouTube video, which is how we found you. I found you a long time ago, man, and I've been following you for years now. And I'm like, this dude's just so laid back and cool. But you pick up the guitar, and it's like, wow, it's like, holy crap! I've never, you have. I'll say this: you have your own signature style. Like I know It's Alfred Potter when you're playing. It's not Malmsteen. It's not this person. It's not Satcher. Whoever else is. You have your own distinct style. So I want you to know that. I'm sure other people have told you that, but I want you to know that as you go in finishing up this album here, that you've got your signature style, man. What comes out is from you and doesn't sound like anybody else. You're not trying to sound like anybody else. You're sounding just like Alfred Potter, man. And that's what we want.
Wow. I mean, thank you so much. That's wow, that's made my whole week. That's really kind of you to say.
Good. I'm glad to hear that.
But it gets me thinking because I'm a little strange. I'm a musician who doesn't really listen to music. I've got maybe 5 bands that I listen to, and that's it. And I don't play anybody else's songs. I don't play anybody else's licks. I'm just all day, every day, focusing on my own scale runs, my own licks, working on my own music. So it's almost as if I haven't really had a chance to play other people's stuff and to learn how to play like other people. Does that make any sense?
Yeah. I want to add a little bit to that. You're making something very very crucial here, which I and Jason and I have talked about this as well. You're matured quite a lot in your own playing, and we've had this discussion of in our early years. That's most of the time when we're like listening to new ideas and new artists that we haven't found yet, and they become impactful in our growth. And so, we go through a phase of trying to mimic our favorite artists, but then after a certain point, you start to take all that inspiration and it starts to become just like one giant melting pot, and it becomes part of just your palette of what you are able to accomplish. And so now, like, honestly, I feel you. Like, I listen to my own music way more than I listen to anybody else. But it goes to serve that, you're creating something that you've created the music that you want to listen to. And there's nothing wrong with that. And you get to you're feeding that and nurturing that part of yourself where, it'll help foster newer ideas based upon your own ideas. I think that's a very, very natural thing for us as musicians to kind of almost obsess over what we've created. And then, some points, we feel like we expand ourselves through our own, journey. But then, you have some inspiration from someone new down the line. And it's like, oh, I've never really thought about doing it like that before. And now you've added to the already big, giant pile of, inspiration that you already have from what you used to listen to. And it just matures. I think that happens to many musicians over the course of time.
And I think it's great. Yeah, I mean, it just reminds me real quick of kind of, I guess, I don't know if you want to call it affirmation, but I think it was the beginning of this year when I wrote on a whiteboard. You got two types of people, and there's nothing wrong with being either one, and you're going to be a little bit of one, but more of the other. But I wrote down producer, then the word consumer. I crossed out the word consumer. I was like, I am a producer, and we're talking about business, we're talking about music, we're talking about everything. I need to cut down on my consumption and be the producer and just create more, whether that's content, whether that's business plans, whether that's music. So I think if you are a producer, which you are, Alfred, you're a producer, you're writing your own music, I think you should spend the majority of your time producing. You can consume some, but if you're spending so much time producing, you don't really have the time or energy to consume that much. So I think you have to figure out, or we all have to figure out which side of the spectrum do we want to be on more, right? Like I want to be 80% producing and maybe 20% consuming. We're going to consume some, but I listen to some music in the gym, but I'm like you. I don't listen to a ton of music. I never listen to other music at home because I'm always in the studio. I'm always doing something with my own music. But yeah, I listen in the gym sometimes. But even then, sometimes I listen to a podcast. Sometimes I'll listen to our podcast over again, look for my mistakes. Man, I said this and whatever. But that, and of course, I learned, I'm becoming better at speaking Thai. So I listen to a lot of that as well. So I'm like you, I don't listen to a ton of music. So I get that. But again, you're a producer of music, not so much a consumer. And going back to what we talked about earlier, you have created your own unique signature style. And that's just going to naturally expand, like Ken said, as you play more, as you write more.
Yeah, I agree with that. Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, Alfred, is there anything else you'd like to leave? Ken, you got something more, or you guys have something else before we, because I do want to talk about the ultimate course for everybody listening, but anything else to add?
I think that our conversation today was very, very insightful. No, thanks for sharing.
Dude. Yeah, thank you so much, Alfred, for being on. Guys, so sweep picking master. If you want to learn how to sweep pick, like from beginning to end, you can be an advanced sweep picker. That course is going to help you because as you get deeper into the course, Alfred's got some amazing things that he teaches and shares with you. If you're new to sweep picking, right, or just new to lead guitar playing, he starts the course out at a very beginner level there and just shows you the fundamentals. And even if you are say intermediate or advanced, going back to those fundamentals that Alfred goes over, it's not just, hey, here's a sweep picking pattern, play this. He goes over the fundamentals, the details of how to hold your pick, the motion, and all that stuff. So he takes you through step by step in sweep picking master. So I encourage you to do that. It's actually, Alfred, the course has helped me tremendously. I told you that's been a weaker point, but I can say I'm better at that technique now, having gone through your course. I need to go back through it again, which is the beauty of Sweep Picking Master and all of our courses. You can revisit them. We encourage you to go over them as many times as you want. But guys, you can find this course on metalmastermind.com. Go to our website, metalmastermind.com. You'll see the link for courses there. You'll see all our courses. Go to Sweep Picking Master, pick it up it is only going to help you. So Alfred, before we end here, thank you once again. It was such an honor and pleasure to have you on today. Everyone listening, thank you for listening. Thank you for supporting and being a part of Metal Mastermind. As always, until next time, create your own sound.